Welcome everyone to another Next Gen Leaders podcast. Today we welcome Tendayi Viki. First of all, Tendayi, thank you very much for joining us on Next Gen Leaders podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome. I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun. So Tendayi is going to give an introduction of himself, but before he does that, I'll give an introduction. And he joined us all the way from Zimbabwe. So thank you very much, and really looking forward to this time with you. So Tendayi is an author and corporate innovation expert. As associate partner at Strategizer, he helps companies innovate for future while managing their core business. He has written 3 books: Pirates in the Navy, The Corporate Startup, and The Lean Product Lifecycle. There's a myriad of accomplishments here, Tendayi, I could talk about. But I will also add in there that you do also contribute regularly to Forbes as well. So thank you again for joining us. And I'd love for you to just give everybody an overview, and especially your background being from Zimbabwe as well, and also a global traveler.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. It's awesome to be here. So I was born in Harare, Zimbabwe. That's where I grew up, in Harare. And I went to school here, went to university here. I did my undergrad here, actually. And my undergraduate degree is in psychology. So I'm a psychologist. And then what happened was I got a scholarship to go and do a PhD in psychology in the UK.
Yeah, right.
So then I ended up like back and forth between UK and Zimbabwe for 25 years, right? But my family was settled in the UK. And then only last year in 2021, in August, did I come back to Zimbabwe to try and kind of settle on a permanent basis. And that's mostly because I ended up working with Strategizer, and our team is like 40, 50 people, and we're fully remote. And so when you work for a fully remote organization, you start asking yourself, if I could be anywhere in the world, what am I doing in Kent? Right?
It's actually where my mother was born, funnily enough.
All right. Yeah, nothing wrong with Kent. It's a beautiful place. It's the Garden of England. Yeah. But I think you can just see like the amount of light coming through that window.
Yes, I
just
get you.
Like the level of sunshine and warmth that,
Well, behind me is my winter. So it could be worse. It could be worse.
Exactly. So yeah, that's how I end up here. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm really interested because you've also got a global footprint and background, because you even said you've been to Brisbane and worked with the University of Queensland. So give us a bit of an overview of that global footprint that where your career has taken you.
Yeah. So when I was an academic, I would do a lot of these, sabbaticals and off terms where you spend like research fellowships, where you spend time at a different institution to where you work. So I did 6 weeks in Brisbane, at the University of Queensland School of Psychology there. I did some time in Cape Town as well at the School of Psychology there. But I think the coolest one was when I did a year at Stanford in Silicon Valley. Yeah. That was very transformative. That's what got me into the career path that I am in now. Being exposed to just innovation everywhere, innovators everywhere, entrepreneurs everywhere. Steve Blank, who's the father of the Lean Startup movement, used to host a weekly session at Stanford where an important entrepreneur would come and give a keynote to the students. So Mark Andreessen would come, Mark Zuckerberg would come, and I just used to sneak in the back and sit and kind of listen to it. It was very, very transformative. So when I left Stanford, I kind of made the decision that I was going to move away from being an academic and get into entrepreneurship, tech, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's how I ended up again, just the travel and that exposure led to career choices. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so you one of the reasons we really wanted you on this show, because your global experience in your depth of knowledge and your expertise is incredible. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will reach out to you because the expertise is amazing. You talk about innovation theater. And when I hear this, I actually just go back to your days at Silicon Valley going, that could have been classified as innovation theater, literally. But when you say that, what do you mean? What is it?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time in my career, right, working with leadership. It's particularly in large corporations. So a lot of Fortune 500 companies, large pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, airline companies. I spend a lot of time in all these various industries, working with companies that have 10,000 employees and above, billions of dollars in revenue, various industries. And I remember when I first started doing the work, one of the hardest conversations I would have with leadership was trying to convince them that they need to have innovation at all.
Yes.
So that was like a real struggle, like a decade ago. That was a struggle. But over time, there's been this sort of embrace of the fact that the best way to grow your company is to launch new products, new services, new business models, new value propositions. So that argument is no longer on the table. That argument is now set aside.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is what people are then doing, what they pick up to try and say we're not going to do innovation. The things they start doing is what we call innovation theater. So it's they have an excessive focus on ideation and technology, like a pretty excessive focus on that, without realizing that actually it takes more than ideas to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But all the cool things in innovation are mostly around ideas. So you can do a hackathon, you can do an idea jam, you can do a competition, you can do a design session, you can do whiteboard stuff with sticky notes. So you walk into companies and they have all these spaces that are designed for creativity and they're really inspiring spaces to be in. But like I always say, like everybody wants to be Steve Jobs, right? But the Steve Jobs they want to be is the one on stage presenting the iPhone.
Yes. Yep.
Not the one in the backstage having to work to take an idea from idea to profitable business model. And so that's what innovation theater is the excessive focus on all these cool innovation stuff without really thinking about how to then transform all of those things to value creating activities.
And it's really interesting because, I mean, we talk about ideation, and we have a particular niche around what the definition is. When you think of who you work with and where you expertise is, I creating ideas for a small group of people within an organization, or is creating ideas really a collective role and responsibility from everyone in the organization?
I mean, ideas should come from anywhere, and everybody should have a chance to contribute to ideation. The worst form of ideation, or the worst form of like generating ideas, actually, idea competitions are not that great because they have this psychological impact.
Yeah.
And I'll show you how. So the worst form of brainstorming is the guy standing, usually a man as well, standing in front of the whiteboard with a pen great, right. Tell me your idea. And then he writes it down. And tell me your idea. And then, like that. So they're like, we're doing a brainstorm. Because what happens in those situations is people self-edit.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Right. So the best way to have good ideas is to have people ideate privately. Like write down all the ideas you have to solve this problem.
Yes.
And then to really break the ice, you can even ask people to say, share what you think is your worst idea. And everybody's having fun, like, oh my,
cool.
There's this, right? And then, so it kind of frees up. And it's like, well, that's not actually so bad. And then people are having, and then you share the idea that you think this company would never do. Yeah, the idea that this company would never. So you change the criteria around ideation to make people participate. And idea competitions are hard because everybody can see the ideas that people are submitting, and then people have to kind of vote for some. So people start self-editing. It's exactly the same as the guy with the pen on the whiteboard.
Yes.
Except that we think that it's great because it's a technology platform, but it has the same psychological effects. And so that's kind of the work we try and do to kind of get people to actually think about that. Yeah.
It's actually interesting because one of our clients who happens to be in South Africa, interestingly enough, one of the younger team when we first rolled out the platform put something like 35, 40 ideas in the app within the first 24 hours. And I saw this, and I had to. I went, my goodness, what's happening? Because I know people have ideas, but to put 30, 40 in 24 hours. So I know this young fellow just amazed me. Incredible conversation, and I just wanted to understand why. Why did you put all these ideas in? And he said, and he was very clear, very succinct. He goes, he's 25 years old, and he goes, Marty, I'm a marketing major, and I'm full of ideas. that's what I do. I said, but what I'd
Right.
normally do is I'd put it here, I'd write it down on a piece of paper, I'd sort of put it there. But then when I realized I could just collate it in stratapp,
Mm,
but and this
mm,
was really the magic, and I'm really looking forward to our next topic of how do we move from theatre, right, into the practical element of it. But and then he goes, but now at 25, I didn't even really know what strategy was. But
right.
when I could see the plan, I could see all of my ideas and put them all into context.
Yes.
So I now know the 40 may be 20, and then I know the 20 will probably be 5 really good ones.
Mm,
But
mm-hmm,
they were self not just efficating, but they were self contextualizing what that really meant to how do we move
exactly.
something forward. And I just went, okay, this is fantastic. Right. It
Exactly. And
wasn't,
that's the power of,
yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, go
And
ahead.
sorry, I was just going to pay you a compliment.
Oh,
And that's the power of what you do, which is that the best way to have good ideas is to have loads of ideas.
mm, mm, yeah.
And what you want is to provide people with a chance to have all of those ideas flow out of them. And
Yes.
so if you could put them in a context where they're not self-editing or self-limiting in terms of expressing those ideas. And
Yes.
then only after that do you then go through them and go, okay, so which ones of these do we want to focus on? Which ones of these are value? And you can use a strategic lens to evaluate them, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
let's
that's the
talk
power
about
of what
that for a minute because you said something really powerful. Ideas are just ideas until we actually rally around them and execute them. Right?
yeah.
That's all they are. So how do leaders move their companies from the innovation theater to creating real growth engines?
Right. So what's interesting about ideas is that again we were talking about ideas, there's loads of them.
Yep.
You could even if you wanted to be insulting, you could say ideas are a dime a dozen. I wouldn't go that far. But you do need to combine your ideas with or transform your ideas into value propositions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the first lens, right? So
Transform ideas into value propositions.
value propositions. Like that's really important
Yep.
because having a great technology is not the same thing
Mm.
as having a great value proposition,
Yep.
right? The technology might be cool, but it may not solve the key customer problem. If you think historically, like, I don't know, a few decades ago, Sony, when they launched Betamax, had the best video quality,
Mm-hmm.
probably even the best designed video player actually was like really well designed. It was like the best, right? And the best picture quality for the Betamax video cassette.
Yep.
JVC's VHS had poor picture quality, but compared to the Betamax, they had at the beginning 2 hours of video playtime,
Right.
whereas Betamax had 1 hour of video playtime.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
Right? And the value proposition of the 2 hour playtime is you can record a whole movie and watch a whole movie.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so even though Sony had the better technology, they didn't have the better value proposition.
Yeah. Very cool.
VHS did. And so you can see that, again, similar technologies, but the one that figures out the value proposition that resonates is the one that typically wins. And so it's really important for people to think that with this technology, what problem are we solving for customers? And business leaders should be leading their teams through the lens of asking those questions. Great tech, sexy technology, but what problem are we solving with this? That's how you move from just a theater of idea competitions or ideation or whatever to value proposition. So that's step one. There's a secondary step after that, but
Yep.
that's the first step. I don't know if you have questions or you want to dive deeper into that
No,
element, or
no,
do you
I'm in
really just
awe.
keep
I'm writing down as we speak. Transform ideas to value proposition, and even the idea of that value proposition, right? Is it's deep. It's not shallow. It may be simple. At the end of the day, it may come across as simple, but the
right.
reality is it may take a bit of 20 ideas, 30 people in. So, okay, this is the piece that's going to really allow our value
Exactly.
proposition to resonate. That is a great
Exactly.
that is a great example.
Yeah. And you have to think about like what pains you're solving for customers, what positive outcomes you're creating
Yeah,
for customers. So it's a good lens to filter through ideas
yeah, love
once you
it.
have them. So we played, right? Having a great technology is not the same as having a great value proposition.
Yep.
So here's another one that's a bit counterintuitive. Having a great value proposition is not the same as having a great business model.
Mm-hmm.
So you could actually have a value proposition that resonates with customers, And you could still fail because it's either it costs too much, you can't figure out the channel, you don't have the right price point. Maybe the world is not yet ready to absorb your technology. You can imagine like early stage electric vehicle companies, they didn't have enough charge stations and things like that, right? So all those business model elements can also kind of kill an idea that's got a good value proposition. And
Yes.
so to succeed with innovation, you need to be really great at value proposition design and business model design.
Hmm.
And if we dive deeper again into the VHS story that we were just talking about, Sony with the Betamax decided to focus on you can watch what you want at any time. And they
Hmm.
kind of just talked about that all, about recording TV shows and things like that. JVC figured out actually, if people are recording full movies in our format, why don't we partner with video rental shops
Mm.
so that they can then use our cassettes to
To
sort
watch
of
the entire movie.
rent, yeah, and
Yeah.
people can just rent our videos, etc. And then that allowed them to scale because the video rental market was also growing. So
Yes.
they made a business model choice that Sony didn't
Yeah.
make. And then so that also then extended that sort of value proposition combined with business model, and then that allowed them to be successful. By the time Sony got to the 2 hour length, VHS had already like occupied so much space that it became harder for Sony to sort of catch up with
Yeah.
the Betamax. And so you can see what we mean. Like the technology was amazing, the ideas were amazing,
Mm.
but eventually, what wins with innovation is value propositions that resonate with customers and business models that are scalable and profitable.
Yes.
And that's what we call a successful innovator, by the way.
Yeah.
That's the distance between invention and innovation. That's
Yeah.
the distance between creativity and innovation.
Yeah.
That's the distance between the ideas guy and the innovator,
Yeah.
right? And so you have to travel that distance and create capabilities in your organization that support people in traveling that distance from idea to business model.
Yes. So let's talk about a leader, like let's coach a leader for a minute,
Right.
right? Because I mean, you talked about Steve Jobs. I mean, you're talking about some iconic people, right? And then they're not the ones in the back of the room doing all the work to be able to ensure whatever that vision looks like can be
Yes.
really attained, right? And then there's the innovation side, as you said, around the value prop, and then there's the business model side. Let's just focus in on the innovation side, and creating ideas and creating ways to, improve something. You talked about client service or client servicing earlier, or is our products and that sort of stuff. What are the steps that I need to take as a leader to ensure that I embed this into my everyday practice that is engaging my team in a way that they really feel like they're at the front of the innovation curve here, and their input is highly valuable? What's the tips?
Yeah. So one of the most interesting things about dealing with innovation, especially in established companies with leaders, is that they have a magnetic attraction to the pre-existing business
Mm-hmm.
because they want to spend time on that, making sure it grows, making sure it scales, making sure that it remains efficient. So that draw to the pre-existing business is a real problem
Mm-hmm.
because what we've learned is that the amount of time that the top leadership spends on innovation is literally the driver of that company's
Yeah,
innovation
right.
culture. When CEOs and C-level execs spend 30, 40, 50% of their time on innovation,
Yeah.
then everybody in the company knows that that's an important aspect of how we're running our business. So
Yes.
that's coaching tip number one is like, how much time do you even spend on this stuff?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is if you're going to spend time, then you need to spend time doing the right things. And the number one thing that a CEO should never have is a pet project
Mm-hmm.
where they get enamored by some technology or some idea that they had a conversation with somebody, and then they pour all their resources, billions of dollars, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, on this one idea.
Yes. Yep.
Because if we're saying the best way to have good ideas is to have loads of ideas,
Yep.
what we're saying is that it's impossible for leadership to pick winning ideas on day one.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
So that's the second piece of advice is as a leader, you have to embrace that you can't pick the winning idea on day one. What
Yes.
you can do is create the environment in which the best ideas emerge.
Yep.
Which means that rather than making big bets on one or two ideas that resonate with you, it's better to make multiple small bets.
Mm-hmm.
And once people know that our leader loves making multiple small bets on interesting ideas. You've now planted the seeds for people to come up with
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
or people to notice a customer problem that needs solving and then pitch the idea because you've created an environment where you're making multiple small bets.
Yes.
And in the making of multiple small bets is the third and final lesson, which is you have to accept that a large majority of those small bets will not turn out to be anything.
Yes. Yeah.
But the making of small bets is in the service of finding the things that actually work out. And the
Yes.
things that work out will pay for the multiple small bets, which means that you have to accept and embrace and celebrate failure as learning.
Yes. Yeah. And
Right.
this is really good. And because there's a lot of conversation around probably inclusion's not the right word for it, but it's especially with the younger generation coming through the workforce. You know,
Yeah.
they've grown up through technology. They've grown up with a lot of stuff motoring through their minds of
Mm,
creativity, because it's
mm.
just become so fast. How do we rally the idea of, well, I know how to do this better. I want to share my thoughts and my thinking here. And I'm 2 years into the workforce, which is brilliant, right?
Yeah.
When I've run larger companies before, that was who I'd spend the first hour and 2 hours of my day with.
Right.
It just, that's where the energy was, and I ensured that they were fueling as opposed to what we
Yeah.
traditionally did top down. I never believed in that model. So how do you ensure that you open up that avenue for ideas, but at the same time you may not be able to make a lot of series of bets. You may just be able to make one or two, and you may have to actually say, you know what, there's 20 I just have to put to the side right now. How does that not become an area where, well, my ideas don't go anywhere, so I'm not going to give any more ideas?
Yeah. So that's interesting. Um, so the first thing is, applications such as yours are really great for that, right? Creating because people. All right. So my mind is kind of spinning here. But let's forget about innovation for the time being and think about the core business, right?
Yes. Yep.
So it's funny that when the core business is being run, right, the way that the workflows and the work processes are designed is to support the goals. So
Mm-hmm.
we have Oracle for accounting, we have SAP for hiring, we have payroll software, so we built all of these tools that allow us to run the core business.
Yes.
Now we cannot take those tools and apply them to innovation because those are execution tools.
Mm-hmm.
For innovation, we need tools that allow us to search, filter, test, iterate, et cetera, et cetera. And so applications that are designed for that process should also start getting absorbed and used inside large organizations.
Yes.
Applications that are useful for business design, applications that are used for testing business models, applications for prototyping, and all of these things. Like those are it's just what should be inside the company, and people should learn how to do that.
Yes.
What I would say in response to your question is when people submit ideas, they should see the process of how the decisions are being made to choose which ideas to be.
Yeah.
Like how did we get to this point? Because that will then tell the people that okay, next time I will submit this idea or that idea. But I would say 2 ideas are not enough.
Yes. Yeah.
Like if you're really looking to find really cool ideas, you should at least invest in 10.
Yes.
Like minimum. The only thing that people always think is that they have to make big bets. You could literally give a team $2,000
Yes.
to just do the first thing of like go talk to customers and find out if the need is real.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can invest in more than 2 ideas. The goal of the investment is not to execute on the idea. That's the thing that we have to walk away from.
Yes.
The goal of the investment is to find out if there's a there.
Yes. Yes.
The goal of the team is to gather evidence that their idea has legs in the real world before they start building anything.
Yeah.
Because the moment we start investing in building, then we're spending a lot more money. And so we have 2 steps basically in innovation. The first step is design, which is creativity, coming up with as many ideas as possible. And we have a process for making sure that the ideas are really breakthrough and not just a regurgitation of stuff we already do.
Yes.
So we can push design really well. So we say design like you're right, design with no limitation. And then once you're done with designing like you're right, we go to the second phase of innovation, which is test like you're wrong. So you
Yes.
design like you're right, and then you test like you're wrong.
Yeah, I
And
love
it's
that.
the test like you're wrong process where we invest small amounts. Here's $1,000, $2,000, $15,000. Spend the next 12 weeks running experiments, testing prototypes, and
Yes.
then come back with the evidence to show us whether there's traction for your idea in the real world. And it's on that basis that we will then choose the two or three that we're
Yes.
going to double down on and actually
Yeah.
scale.
This
So
this
it's a
Yeah, and because it's got no, there's really no limitations on ideas and creation of what could work better. It's interesting what you said around systems and execution, which is right. Right, we traditionally would buy a finance system to do that. We would traditionally buy a CRM system to do that, or a HCM system to do this. Right, people, revenue, finance, for example.
Mhm, mhm.
And this is where we get really passionate around creating a space. It doesn't matter who you are within the organization. You're constantly viewing, you're constantly experiencing, you're constantly getting frustrated, you're constantly
Exactly.
winning, you may be winning at something. And I say, I'd love to get my ideas out how we could better scale this or better,
Mm,
call it innovation, right? But whatever it may be, right? It might be workflow, maybe systems, maybe whatever product. But the idea is creating that space that anyone can come in, then allowing it become a breathing piece of work, right? Which we create unique workspaces for that. And also people can vote on it. They can say, hey, what do you reckon the rating of this idea is? 5-star, 4-star, 3-star. And you
mm,
can actually
mm.
allow then the community to come in and contribute with it. Now, when a leader says, you know what, I want us to do more, it's not though the leader needs to take it on. We will
No,
empower Martin and maybe a group of people to collectively now come together and put some meat behind the idea to see, is it actually
exactly.
feasible for, yeah. And I love this. And it could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be product, it could be, the kids who just walked through the door, or it could be,
Mm,
somebody who's got deep
mm.
expertise in a particular industry, right? It could
Yes.
be anything
So,
inside the business. Now let's work out how do we get it to the surface so we can actually not just engage everybody on the topics, but now move it forward in a way that's going to enrich everybody's lives. And the way
mhm.
you do this is incredible, because I can see the process that you work through
Right.
is amazing on how you do
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
so Tendai, you and I could talk all day on this idea of innovation theatre. So you've introduced two new words to me. Well, really the one new word of innovation theatre and what the definition is. You also took us through the steps of process. And to be honest, we're a growing company, and I've taken down some notes from this to say, hey, I've got to be looking at a couple of these areas around the actual value proposition and also the business model. And because we're in exactly the scenarios that you referred to the clients earlier, right? We're no
Mhm,
different to that.
mhm.
So as we wrap up, what's some other advice for leaders when you talk about that innovation curve, and how do we help set up the business for success?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that you can innovate on two major areas, right? You can innovate on your core business, like you can create innovations to improve your core business. Amazon has been doing that forever, right? Improving the efficiency in their warehouses with robots. So you can optimize your core business,
Yes.
and some of those are billion-dollar returns. Like you cannot scoff at that.
Yeah.
But I actually believe that investing in new business models, transformative innovation, new value propositions, I think that's got better value.
Mm-hmm.
It's more valuable than investing in just improving your core business.
Yes.
The core business gives you immediate returns,
Yeah.
but the risk is that you could be optimizing a business that's also being quietly disrupted elsewhere.
Yes. Yeah.
So you could be efficiently dying. That's what Alex also told me.
Well, it's interesting
So,
because Amazon did launch a new service here, but
right,
it's enhancing the core service that you talk about, right?
exactly.
It's
But
just
they've also got investments in web services
yeah.
and other business models that they invest in that are not just their e-commerce business model. So it is possible that if you keep optimizing your core business, your company will grow, and that's possible. But imagine if you like optimize your core business and your company grows, but you've also got to these new business models, and they're also growing. So
Mm.
if you don't get disrupted, you get this double benefit of like a new growth engine plus your current growth engine. But
Yes.
if you do get disrupted, you have an insurance policy.
Yes.
You've got a new business model to replace the one
The
that's
core.
that's actually declining. And so
Yeah.
that's the power of innovation, is that it can either really put you on a rocket engine, or it can be an insurance policy. Steve Blank likes to say core business pays your salary, innovation pays your pension,
Yes.
because it guarantees that the company doesn't die.
Yes.
And so that's really what I want leaders to think about. Like, future facing transformative innovation has got double value compared to just optimizing your core business.
Yeah. And that future side of the innovation can come from anywhere,
Yeah.
right?
It
How
can
do we
come
get
from
to it?
anywhere and anybody.
It's really
Yeah.
interesting. It's amazing because even our journey. And sorry to bring this back to straight for a second, but when we look at how do we help an organization take the big picture of a company, the vision, the 1 to 3 year goals, and then link that to daily work in one
Mm.
seamless experience. Now
Yes.
you're talking about company management, and you're talking about team management, right?
Right.
So everyone can now rally around the concepts of what we should be focusing on, where we're going, how we're going to get there, and let's just get in there and do it. Right? That's
Yeah.
great. Our
Yeah.
innovation path right now is the self-management framework that allows me, the individual, to have total and complete visibility and control over where I spend every minute of my day.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the
Mm-hmm.
traditional
Mm-hmm.
corporation team type mindset, which is, hey, we can help your team run more effectively. It's simple, it's creating scale without chaos. But now we really are actually putting a lot of energy in our innovation engine to talk to you and I and every single individual in the global marketplace to put all of those
Right.
calendars, all of that work, and their personal priorities in one simple place to ensure that they're getting what they need to maximize out of every minute of their day, every week,
Yeah.
every month. And it's not being
Yeah.
dictated to them by anyone. They have full control over that. That's our insurance
Mhm.
policy, right? Because
That's
it's
awesome.
creating personal value at a level that has not been done through technology at a corporate level yet. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting how you phrased it. I'm going, that's actually effectively what we're doing. And now we can bring that company management, team management, and the self management
Mm-hmm.
together in one
Mm-hmm.
user experience. Then
Mm-hmm.
that will be a global first. So it's really interesting because there's a lot of companies that I've worked for in the past which have been successful that didn't. They just kept on building on their core model. And when I
Yeah.
when I look at it, they actually didn't have that secondary element to
Exactly.
their business model, which I would agree it's critical to have these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you look at companies that got disrupted, that's also how they got disrupted, right? Was they had a single business model.
Mm,
I mean, you can think of Hasbro, for example, right? Hasbro is really famous for making like the best possible toys. Like,
yes.
they have such a wide portfolio to anything from like Monopoly to Barbie dolls, whatever, right? They got so like Transformer items. They've got such a wide portfolio of toys, but they didn't have a wide portfolio of business models.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
interesting.
When Toys R Us went bankrupt, it was their single major channel, I think, in the US.
Yes.
That was like one of the few like quarters where Hasbro recorded a dip in their revenue, like a profit, like a loss making quarter, right?
Yes.
And so you can really see that there's a real difference between a portfolio of products and services and a portfolio of business models.
Yes. Yeah.
And
That's
having a
really
portfolio
interesting.
of business models is proper diversification.
So, one thing I'm just going to say to our audience for a minute, if you're listening to this and are really interested by the idea of what a core model is, and then what is we talked about innovation, but diversified business model. You actually called it something else, Tendai. What was it? You called it something else. Um,
Transformative innovation.
yeah,
I can't remember. I talk too
it was the
much.
insurance policy side of it. You just
Yes, exactly.
you
Yeah,
articulate
the
it better
insurance
than I
model.
do.
Future-facing business models, future-facing innovation. Yeah.
If you want to learn more, I really encourage you to reach out to Tendai because this to me is as a new company as stratapp is. This to me is one of the things that you need to go through on a journey to ensure that you actually have scalable and sustainable success for the future. And yes, disruptions happen, but the idea is if you get the right value prop with the right business model, I'm with Tendayi. You can make it work, but there has to be a different way of thinking of that. Tendayi, thank you very much for joining us, because even when I go back to our introduction, when you said the words innovate for future while managing their core business, I've gone, I get it now. I get
Right.
it. Yeah, I get, and because
Finally.
when I read that, I went, because it's in front of me, I went, yeah, that's cool. That sounds really cool. But now I know exactly what you're talking about, which is
Yeah, no, thank you.
incredibly powerful, incredibly powerful. So thank you very much for joining us. And I wish you all the very best, and would love to have you back on the show again.
Cool. Thank you. Look forward to that too.
Awesome. Thanks, Tendayi.